Jiren Duran's big season. Tyler ONeal providing some much needed power in the Red Sox lineup. These are just a couple of the many positive takeaways that we can look back on in the 2024 Red Sox season.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is all completely free. So you might as well tune in because Locked On is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome to the show. Happy Tuesday. Some great baseball that we're seeing right now in the NLCS and ALCS. Really hoping for a Guardians win. Obviously, if you are here listening to me, you definitely probably do too. And, Mets Dodgers should be a great series as well. Just as long as it's not the Yankees, literally any of the other three teams would be fine with me. So we'll see how that all plays out. And obviously, one team that we as Red Sox fans wish got to be in the postseason party was the Red Sox after what was a frustrating 2024 season for a team that you felt had potential. And they had some talent there, but they could never put everything all together at the same time, whether that was due to injuries, pitching not performing, or the offense going completely cold. There was never a time when everything was going right for the Red Sox. And they had a good month or two stretch right before the All-Star break in which they were seemingly starting to put things together a little bit more, but it never got to the point where they could fully put everything all together. And that was definitely a frustration. But I think when you look back on a season like the Red Sox in 2024, it's important to pay attention to some of those moral victories, some of those small things that happened that were positives for a Red Sox team filled with lots of negatives on the season. And it's easy to look at the season and be completely down and say, well, this was another disappointing season, third year in a row of missing the playoffs. And that's all fair. And based on how the Red Sox front office made it out to be prior to the season starting, when they said they were going to have this big offseason, make lots of moves to improve the roster, and the roster only improved by a few games from 2023 and ended up finishing right at 500. That's just not ideal and not what we as Red Sox fans expect or want to see. So I understand the frustration, but while we're thinking about all of that, it's important to acknowledge that there are positive takeaways from the 2024 season. For one being Jiren Duran and the big season that he had, MVP caliber season for a lot of the year. And his stats on paper weren't the most eye-popping in terms of batting average and on base percentage, but they were good on top of the fact that he was super versatile. And the numbers on paper don't always tell the full story of a player. And for him, and the way that he was able to just go about his business every day and make it look so easy, but silently be one of the biggest threats of a player in the league is really impressive. From his base running to his really strong defense to obviously his exceptional performances at the plate and being able to contribute offensively in literally every single game is huge. And for him, somebody who really hadn't played in 162 games prior, got used to playing in almost every game of the season besides a couple. Other than that, he was out there every day and hitting leadoff for this Red Sox team. And that, to me, worked wonders for him because the more experience a player gets, the better they can get. And for somebody like him, if he's going to be the leadoff hitter for the future, it's great that he was able to get that type of experience throughout the course of the 2024 season of being in that big spot and being that guy that the Red Sox could turn to when they were in situations where they needed somebody to come up clutch and be able to get on base early so that he could steal a base and get into scoring position to rattle the opposing pitcher. That was a lot of what Jiren Duran brought to his game. And if you look at his 2023 season, that was good. And he was pretty explosive in the second half in 2023. But nobody expected him to have the type of season he had in 2024. Did I expect him to be good? Yeah, sure. But did I expect him to be as good as he was? Absolutely not. So you can take the season that he had in 2024 and get really excited for 2025 as long as he has any semblance of how he performed in 2024 going into 2025. We know it's going to be a big season for him, and we know that he's going to be another big offensive contributor to this Red Sox team down the road, as long as they hopefully don't trade him this offseason, which would be a pretty terrible move on the Red Sox part. But I'm looking forward to seeing the way that he's able to handle that pressure going into next year now, knowing that he has higher expectations on him because of the fact that he had such a strong season in 2024. Going into next year, I'm interested in seeing how he adapts to that and having more responsibility of being a guy who the Red Sox can look to at the top of that lineup to make contact a lot of the time and get himself on base. That's going to be one of the biggest things going into 2025 that I'm paying attention to. But if you're taking away positives from the 2024 season, Duran certainly was one of those positives because he was able to do a lot on every aspect of the game when it came to making things happen and putting pressure on opposing pitchers. Another positive takeaway from 2024 is that you have Tyler ONeal, who brought to the lineup some power that the Red Sox didn't have before. Because if you think of the Red Sox lineup prior to this past season, they had a lot of guys who could make hard contact, but not hard enough contact where they were hitting it over the fence. And that was something Tyler ONeal provided that the Red Sox needed. Because yes, you have Rafael Devers who could hit home runs, but generally the Red Sox lineup was full of guys who could drive in runs by recording base hits or hitting doubles or even sacrifice bunts that help advance a base runner, or even just infield singles and they're fast and they can get to the base. So the Red Sox were always good at playing small ball and having that aspect of their game incorporated. But then when you bring in somebody like Tyler ONeal, he provides a lot of power in the lineup because he was a big home run heavy hitter, a guy who the Red Sox could look to step into that batter's box and hit one over the wall. And the problem with him was it seemed like he always hit his home runs when there was nobody on base. So it was tons of solo shots for him. But he had a big moment late in the year where he hit a home run with runners on base, and it was electric because people hadn't seen that all season long. But despite the circumstances of it, whether there's base runners on or not, he provided power that the Red Sox didn't have before. And did he strike out a lot? Yes, absolutely. I mean, that was frustrating for sure. Did I get annoyed when he would strike out all the time? For sure. I mean, who wouldn't? But at the end of the day, what he provided to this team is something that nobody else provided, which was a guy who consistently could go up there and hit home runs a lot more often than everybody else. And that's going to be the biggest question going into the offseason now is how are we going to replace Tyler ONeal's bat? Are we going to bring in somebody who has that same type of firepower at the plate that Tyler ONeal does? Are we going to be able to find somebody who could hit home runs at as consistent of a rate as he was hitting home runs at? Are we going to be able to find somebody who can replace his spot in that lineup? And that's going to be a big question mark that the Red Sox are going to have to address. Are they going to bring back Tyler ONeal? And if not, who is the replacement for him going to be? What's the plan there? Because what he provided to this lineup, it's hard to argue that that wasn't important to a Red Sox team that really lacked power otherwise. And he provided a little bit of versatility, not only in that regard, but also the fact that he was a right-handed hitter. Because the Red Sox have a really lefty-heavy lineup, so they needed more right-handed firepower in there. So Tyler ONeal was that perfect blend of being able to hit better against lefties because he was a right-handed bat, but he also provided the power that other players in the Red Sox lineup didn't really have. So ultimately, at the end of the day, those are big things that are positives to take away from the Red Sox 2024 season. Jiren Duran and Tyler O'Neill both contributing in ways that the Red Sox really needed them to and making a big difference to the Red Sox offense. And coming up, I'm going to be talking about some more takeaways that were positive from the Red Sox season because there totally are more than you think. If you're looking for a great deal on tickets, whether it's for a sporting event, a concert, a comedy show, GameTime is the best home for you. I actually used it recently to go to a Red Sox game when they were at Citi Field playing the Mets over Labor Day weekend. Yeah, that series in which they got swept by the Mets. That was embarrassing. But I had never been to Citi Field before. So my fiance and I went and we met up with one of his cousins and his fiance. And it was a lot of fun. And we watched the game and we had great seats, like right behind home plate, like only a few rows back. They were great. And I used GameTime to get the tickets because it was so much cheaper than other ticketing vendors. And I would not have even found those tickets probably because they weren't even available on other ticketing vendors. That's the great thing about GameTime is they show you seats that you don't see on other vendors and it's always cheaper. And now the app has a feature, listen and customize your spots, and it can make sure that you have the customized experience. So it's showing you seats that you would be likely to buy for these different events, which I love too. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and more with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. GameTime really does guarantee the lowest prices every time. So next time you're going to a sporting event, take advantage of that. Speaking of sporting events, the Red Sox were not always the most fun team to watch this year when you would attend their sporting event, just because there were a lot of frustrations and things that went wrong for this Red Sox team that fans got really frustrated about, and rightfully so. I mean, it's frustrating to go out there and have high hopes for your team and then for them to just completely fall apart after the All-Star break. It's not a fun feeling to experience as a fan of that team, and I'm hoping that Craig Breslow and the front office avoid that from ever happening again, because they're going to start to lose some of the fan base and they've already lost the trust of the fan base. So this is now more when they have to gain that trust back or attempt to gain that trust back. So hopefully that group can get the fans back on board with convincing them that they want to win, because in reality, at the end of the day, nobody believes that this front office cares about winning. And that's something that needs to change. But despite all of the negatives that went on during the 2024 season, and it's easy to look just at that and feel down on the Red Sox, you have to still look at the positives to take away from the season, like Jiren Duran and Tyler O'Neill and what they provided. But even in regards to the pitching staff, I mean, the starting pitching as a whole performed better than people thought that they were going to. I mean, if you look at the team ERA among starting pitching, they were among the top teams in baseball in starting pitcher ERA. And who would have expected that to happen? Who would have expected the rotation to be a positive of this team when you have other areas of the team that we thought were going to step up and you had question marks surrounding the rotation? Because as soon as they acquired Lucas Giolito and found out he wasn't going to be able to pitch all year, it was like, all right, well, great. Now we don't really have a fifth starter. We're trying to figure out how to make ends meet here. Then Garrett Whitlock got injured and the Red Sox were trying to figure out how to replace him. So in reality, there were a lot of question marks when it came to the starting rotation at that time. But you look back on the season and they, as a general rotation, performed better than people thought. I mean, you look at Cooper Criswell, who was a really pleasant surprise out of the Red Sox rotation, would come in there and take care of business. He got added to the rotation when Whitlock went down as the guy to take his spot. And that was a huge moment for him. And he embraced everything about that moment, was able to go in there and consistently put up the good numbers every time he started. And yes, obviously he had his rough patches. They all did. Nobody has a perfect start every time they're out there. But he went out there generally and was able to get the job done and was able to string together lots of strikeouts and lots of light contact, not really giving up lots of home runs. And that's what we like to see for somebody who could potentially be a foundational piece moving forward. That's going to be interesting for them to decide in the offseason is what are they going to do with Cooper Criswell? Is he somebody they see being part of the picture moving forward? Is he somebody that the Red Sox feel can provide a lot of value down the road for them? So he's somebody that I definitely would like to see more of. Maybe they pitch him in the bullpen instead of pitching him in the rotation because they feel like they already have a lot of guys who are pitching enough in the rotation consistently for them to feel like they have that set. And I'm sure they want to add Lucas Giolito into the rotation when he's back. So they might not feel like they need Criswell in the rotation, but he also has pitched out of the pen. So he can totally pitch out of the pen and still provide that value that the Red Sox want him to provide, even if he isn't pitching in the rotation. So I really liked what I saw from Cooper Criswell this year. And you do also have to hand it to Tanner Houck. I mean, we knew what kind of pitcher he was, but his first half of the season was incredible. I mean, considering everything and considering the fact that he hadn't pitched that many innings in his career before, the fact that he was consistently able to get deeper into games than we were used to seeing from him in the past, and the fact that he was the guy at the top of the Red Sox rotation that they could rely on consistently to go out there and have a good outing. That was what was huge about him. Was we couldn't really say this about all of the starters, but we could say about Tanner Houck that he was a guy that we knew we could trust when he was out there on the mound. And that first half of the season, when he was in the early Cy Young conversation, was huge for his confidence. And yes, his numbers dipped a little bit in the second half, but I do think fatigue was part of that. Him getting used to pitching as many innings as he did, and now he's broken into pitching that many innings. So now moving forward, he can hopefully get to the point where he feels more comfortable pitching that many innings, and it's almost like second nature to him, as opposed to feeling really tired towards the end of the season because he hasn't pitched that many innings, and then having his quality of work that he's producing on the field go down because of it. So I like that they broke him in to pitching more innings rather than sticking to what they had before, because now moving forward, he can hopefully consistently stick to pitching more innings over time. And that was the other big thing. I mean, Brayan Bello, when you look at the rotation, I mean, he did not have a good first half of the season, but if you look at his second half numbers and the way that he was able to turn it around, that in itself is a big positive for this Red Sox team, because people had kind of given up on Bello and said he's not reliable, which was a reasonable assumption at the time and a fair evaluation because he hadn't been pitching well and he had some scary outings there in the first half. But then in the second half, when he started applying more of his strengths and what he knows and what he's comfortable with, you notice a difference in the pitcher. He looked more confident out there, looked like somebody who was able to go out there and take care of business no matter what, and looked like somebody who was ready every start to go out there and shove. And in the second half of the season, he really did start to shove. And if you think about it in the most positive way, whatever he figured out in the second half of the season that he saw working for him, I'm sure he'll carry over and apply to 2025, which will hopefully naturally help his numbers improve as a starting pitcher. So you can look at all of that combined and say, wow, Bello figured something out in the second half of the season. He made an adjustment that worked for him, figured out his strengths and honed in on those, and was able to get to the point where he said, all right, this is what I feel comfortable doing. And this is me as a pitcher, so I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it this way. And I think that really benefited him, and hopefully moving forward, it can continue to benefit him in 2025 and beyond. Then you look at somebody who only got a few starts at the end of the season in a really small sample size in Richard Fitz, a guy who the Red Sox got in the Alex Verdugo trade, which early on in the season, people were saying, well, the Yankees totally won the Verdugo trade because Greg Weissert was one of the guys who came over in that trade too, and he was struggling. I mean, out of the Red Sox bullpen, he wasn't always reliable. And yes, he had his good outings, but he also had some really bad ones. And people were like, well, great. This is the only guy from that trade who's up in the majors right now, and so far he's not panning out, so the Red Sox lost the trade. Then Alex Verdugo started to not play that well in New York and hasn't really been overly reliable in general. So then you go and you look at other guys that the Red Sox got in the trade, and one of those guys was Richard Fitz, a pitcher who was well coveted in the Yankees system and came over to the Red Sox. And due to injuries and reshuffling of things, he was able to get his call up late in the season for the Red Sox and make a few starts to gain exposure to pitching at the major league level. And what did he do? Went out there and shoved, pitched really well, and he struggled a little bit in his last start of the season, which was in the Red Sox last week of the regular season. So that one outing, he certainly struggled a little bit more than he had in his other ones. But overall, he took care of business and absolutely shoved and got to the point where he said, all right, like maybe I can do this. And in his interviews post game, he was carrying himself really well and saying, you know, it was nice to be able to go out there and pitch, and I just did my thing. And he just sounded really confident in that. And that's such a benefit for the Red Sox that he was able to get his feet wet and at least get some exposure to playing at the major league level and being on that mound at Fenway, because you know what? Fenway's a hard place to pitch. Hard fan base that we know doesn't take it easy on players, and it can be such a tough environment. I mean, the seats feel so close to the action on the field, so the players can hear things going on in the crowd. So the fact that he was able to get his feet wet and get used to that a little bit, and that he was able to do it well, is a positive sign for the future of the Boston Red Sox, because there's a chance now that maybe he works his way into a rotation spot. I'm sure the Red Sox still want to see more from him because, again, it was a small sample size. But at the end of the day, if the Red Sox feel confident in him and what he's doing, then maybe they do bring him into the rotation to start 2025, or at least a little bit in. Maybe he starts the season in AAA. They see where he's at and make sure that he's not rusty and that he still has it. And then maybe they give him a shot and they say, all right, listen, like, this guy deserves it. He's proved himself. We're going to give him the opportunity. So that would be fun to see. And it would also save the Red Sox from having to stress to find two external starters. If they just acquire one who's an ace caliber starter, then they're looking at Tanner Houck, Brian Bayo, Lucas Giolito probably in the rotation, and Cutter Crawford. But if one of those guys starts to slip or gets injured, they can stick Fitz right in there. So he looked really good in his few starts that he made at the end of the season, and that's certainly something that's a positive to take away from the Red Sox 2024 season. And how do we wrap all of that up with the positive takeaways? You won't want to miss it next, because there are some things that you might not have even thought of. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. It's a great deal and a great way for you to go and place your bets and also see how things are going in other games and get a huge return if some of those bets hit. So FanDuel gives you a great opportunity to make immediate money and actually feel like it's changing your life, because it's easy for people to advertise this is life-changing money, but this really can be life-changing money. And I've seen it with my fiance firsthand when he makes money and gets good returns on these bets. So I highly recommend you checking out FanDuel if you're looking to make a little bit of extra cash, and if you're a big sports fan who would genuinely enjoy that and enjoy being invested in following all these bets and saying, hey, I won. It's for you. We're talking about the Boston Red Sox 2024 season and the biggest positive takeaways from it, because it's really important to understand that not everything is going to be good all the time. And there's going to be things that don't go well. There's going to be things that you wish went differently. We all feel that way sometimes. And a lot of times in 2024 with the Red Sox, how we wish things went differently because we wish they had been a playoff team and that they were just a little bit better than they were. All fair, but while you're thinking about all of those things, you also should think about what went well, because there are things that went well that we can take into the future of this Red Sox team that's very exciting. And one of those positive takeaways about this Red Sox team from 2024 is down in the farm system at the AAA level, where you have Christian Campbell, who absolutely is killing it in the minors and is in AAA right now. And I talked on yesterday's show about who's going to be playing second base in 2025. Is it going to be Christian Campbell? Is it going to be Vaughn Grissom? Are they going to be battling for it during spring training? the Red Sox are going to figure all that out as they go, I'm sure. But Christian Campbell is a really strong Red Sox prospect who likely will have a place on this team later on in the future and will be somebody who's going to be contributing a lot. And that's really exciting to think about as a Red Sox fan, because second base has always been a position for a while now that the Red Sox didn't really have a defined starter at. And now that they have Vaughn Grissom and they also have Campbell, who's in the system and is playing that position really well, who is going to be the guy that is playing that position? And that's a good problem to have. Now, instead of having nobody who's defined to play that position, now they have two guys who are capable of being that guy at second base. So it's a good problem to have, because whoever they pick will hopefully be somebody who can be reliable, that they can trust to play that position well. Then staying within the farm system, you have Kyle Teal, who also has been moving through the Red Sox system really quickly and is a highly regarded prospect, one of the top prospects in baseball right now. And he's somebody who is going to be the catcher of the future. And when you think about the Red Sox catching in 2024, you had Conor Wong, who defensively was one of the worst catchers in baseball. He provided some nice offensive productivity, especially in the first half of the season. His second half, his numbers dipped on offense. And if that's the hitter that he is, whose numbers dipped on offense in the second half, then he obviously is no better than just a backup catcher, which I think people are holding out hope that he could be more than that, because of the fact that Wong was the guy that they got in the Verdugo trade and was going to be the catcher that was going to be there regularly every day. And he will be playing a lot still, but he just isn't good enough to be that number one starting catcher. But you have Kyle Teal, who's really special in the system. So when he gets called up to the majors, then he can be that number one starting catcher, and you could put Wong behind him. Teal plays more, but Wong plays on the other days when he's not playing. He would basically become the new Reese McGuire, who is the backup catcher, because you had Reese and you had Danny Jansen, both of whom could not produce at a really high level in the backup catching role in 2024. So then when you think about what it could be in 2025 with Kyle Teal at the helm and Conor Wong right behind him, that overall could be a good situation for the Red Sox. And then already that's an upgrade at catcher. So got to be patient there with Kyle Teal. I don't think they should go and acquire a catcher this offseason. I think they should either bring Reese McGuire back up or just sign Danny Jansen maybe to a one-year deal to be that backup guy who's the placeholder until Teal does come up. But that's something to really look forward to, is what is this guy going to be? And is he going to be this superstar catcher that he might be panning out to be? So that's something positive that we can think about. And also Roman Anthony, another big prospect in the Red Sox system, who I actually met at Winter Weekend last year. He's another prospect that the Red Sox are really high on, somebody who the Red Sox feel like can be a huge piece for the future in the outfield. And the outfield situation right now for the Red Sox is good. I mean, there's lots of depth there and lots of talent, and the outfield certainly was not a weakness of the team in 2024. And I think people tend to look back on the days of Mookie, JBJ, and Andrew Benintendi and think, well, the Red Sox can never match that outfield, which obviously that group was legendary. I mean, JBJ was probably the best defensive center fielder in the sport at the time when he was playing with the Red Sox. And obviously Mookie, is an all-around great player. Andrew Benintendi made some really nice plays in the outfield too. But if you think about the guys they have out there now, like Jiren Duran, Wilyer Abreu, Cedar Rafaela, those guys are all really talented defensively. And then if you add Roman Anthony into the mix, who at the plate is an upgrade from Cedar Rafaela, then you're really looking at an outfield that could be super dangerous. And Roman Anthony is really highly regarded as the top prospect in baseball right now, according to Baseball America. And that's no joke. That doesn't just happen by accident. That means that the way he's playing right now in the minors is something that they genuinely see translating over to the major league level when he gets to that. And that's huge for the Red Sox, because he could be a guy who could be an absolute game changer when it comes to that outfield, and offensively could be a guy that can provide a lot of value at the plate for the Red Sox. And thinking about that core and when they all come up to Boston, that could be really positive in terms of the Red Sox ability to sustain a winning culture. And we're not just seeing one season in which they make a deep postseason run. We're seeing multiple seasons in which they make a deep postseason run because all of these guys are there and they're getting the job done. So another big positive takeaway is that their top prospects just continue to improve and continue to work their way up to the point where we can hopefully see them at the majors soon. And obviously, it wasn't a positive that Rafael Devers had his shoulder thing that he was battling through all season long. And it was clear in the later half of the year that he was struggling because he was trying to fight through it and play through it. But he was probably in such excruciating pain that it was hard for him to do that. And as a result, his numbers weren't as good as Red Sox fans would have wanted them to be. And I do get why. I understand that it was frustrating, but the only positive to take away from that is that now it forced him and the Red Sox to address it. It forced them to bench him for the last few weeks of the season so that he could rest his shoulder. And it forced them to say, okay, let's figure this out this offseason. So the good news is that it'll now get him to get it under control this offseason and hopefully fix it, whether it involves surgery or not, to the point where he can come back and be this big power bat named Rafael Devers that the Red Sox know he can be. So that's the only positive from that. Obviously, the shoulder injury itself is not a positive, but the fact that the Red Sox were eventually forced to face it head on and not just put it off is going to be huge, hopefully, for his future success with this team. So lots of positive things you can still take away in what was a tough season overall for the Red Sox, but continue to keep the faith, like I always say, and we'll see what happens this offseason if they do really address some of these needs. Thank you for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Sully is great. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. And he can keep you up to date on all things regarding the NLCS and ALCS. Enjoy baseball this week. Go Red Sox. And I will catch you on the flip side.